I'm really excited to dive into this topic. So all of you know, I'm Jonas Kane, the Director of Programs at Service Year Alliance. And since I've been at the organization in 2016, I've gotten to help lead a lot of our work at the organization on digital awareness and recruitment strategies for our platform, serviceyear.org, and have also gotten to lead some project-based work focused on strategies for collaboration and local recruitment. I am super excited about the two panelists that I have on today that are both doing great works in their respective communities. We have Natalie Gray representing Central Texas, and Mika Smith, who is representing Central Florida. Before we dive into questions, I just want to give each of them a quick chance to introduce themselves and give a little bit of background. Natalie, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Natalie Gray. I'm in Austin, Texas, and I'm the managing director for AmeriCorps Central Texas. I have a career in nonprofits and schools, and in the last 5 years have been an independent contractor. And so I contract with this collaborative to provide backbone support to help them do together all the things that they decide to do. It's nice to be here today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mika. I am the UCF AmeriCorps recruiter. I'm going to have to ask that you all extend me some grace today. I'm having a very rough week, but I'm still going to push on and try to put on a good panel for you today. Within my role, I serve on the University of Central Florida's campus, but I'm also a part of the service collective that functions within the Central Florida area. And yeah, so hopefully you'll learn more about me as the panel goes on.
Thank you both. And Mika, so glad that you were still able to join us today as well. So to open up the conversation, one of the things I'd like to start off with is that for those of you who have been in the recruitment space, either working directly as a recruiter or just being in the service year space more generally, we know that from year to year, struggles, challenges with recruitment can vary, but generally speaking, when you're asking programs what's top of mind as a challenge, recruitment tends to be one of those things that crops up pretty high on the list. But that being said, it's not necessarily an area that all communities and states have necessarily made a deliberate decision on to approach collectively and think through how to set joint goals and be approaching recruitment locally and through an equitable lens. So I'm curious just to start, what inspired your respective communities to work collaboratively in pursuing recruitment as a joint strategy? For whoever wants to jump in first on that one.
Well, I looked at this question again as I was preparing this morning, and the word that came to mind was pain. I think that, our organizations were really struggling. There are 9 organizations that collaborate in AmeriCorps Central Texas. And basically, they had the funding, they had the seats, but they couldn't find the people. And some were even having to decrease their core size, which meant decreasing impact, given how valuable core members are to the work that they do. And so I think they really came together out of a sense of crisis and thinking maybe we could work together and find some way to get more hands on deck in Central Texas.
Is a good word. For Central Florida, I believe the word would be just access. There was a lack of access or to actually going both ways, to reaching students and then students getting to the community service opportunities that were available to them. And it was actually the brilliant idea of a guy that goes by the name of Jared Plant. He actually came together to actually form the collective, and from the collective, different AmeriCorps organizations came together to actually start the conversation on what each individual, the nuances between each individual program and what they were seeing when it came to recruitment. So for us, it was access, going both ways, trying to reach students and also students who were interested in service programs that did not necessarily have the access to reaching those programs.
And building off of those initial answers you gave, as you started to work collaboratively, I'm curious, like some of the strategies that you used for how programs have actually started that concrete work of collaborating together and shaping what some of the goals around shared recruitment looks like?
So I'll jump in again. So our collaborative in 2018, I think the people who had been working together realized there could be something more here. And wouldn't it be nice if we could set aside some time and get some help to figure out what that more is? And so with a grant from the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, they embarked upon a strategic planning process. And Mika, I love the word access is key, because a big piece of what came out of that planning process was this light bulb coming on that the organizations were in pain. They couldn't fill every seat, and yet they weren't really inviting Central Texans to serve. So we started thinking about, well, how do we do that? How do you make that happen? And we were able to continue to get support from Michael and Susan Dell. And one of our strategies was to hire a full-time, dedicated, and experienced local recruiter to bring in some expertise around recruitment and best practices, and to have a full-time person that would focus only on local recruitment. Our organizational recruiters tended to find their candidates through the Service Year Exchange, which is a tremendous resource, and through e-grants. But what that meant is they were finding folks who already knew about AmeriCorps, or they wouldn't be at those portals. And they were finding folks who, by and large, were from out of state. And so this full-time local recruiter position let us say, you guys keep doing that, but we're going to have somebody who digs deeply into recruiting the people who live here and letting them know about the opportunity to serve. When it came to setting goals, it wasn't easy, because if you've ever tried to get data from multiple organizations, it is very difficult. And so we couldn't figure out, where are the holes in the pipeline here? Where are we losing people? Where are we getting people? And so we wrote another grant to Good Measure Special Project Fund to fund a shared database. And we'll talk about that later. Still a work in progress. It's still not easy to manage data, but we were able to get enough information to have our recruiter be able to set some realistic goals with organizational recruiters. And ultimately, our goals were based on our strategic plan. So we knew we wanted to build a core that had more Central Texans in it, not at all to diminish the contribution of the many people who come from out of state. But we also wanted to, again, create access for people who already live here. And we wanted to increase racial diversity in the core. And then we also wanted to increase the number of returning members, because that lessens your recruitment need and increases your impact when people come back a second year or third year, and they know what they're doing already and can help sort of lift all the boats. And so Jacqueline just mentioned in the last panel, with funds from Weber Foundation and One Star Foundation, we were able to increase the living allowances of all returners in organizations who didn't provide living allowance increases for returners by $2,000 a piece last year. And we saw our returning member numbers more than double, from 25 to 62 in a single year. And some of the programs who had not previously offered additional funds for returners saw their numbers of returners double, triple, and one even saw them quadruple. And so we really, to stick to the question, we really did say, like, what is it that we're trying to do? We want a more local, more diverse core with more returners and more experience in it. And that's what we just sort of have been working on for the last 2 years.
Make sure I put that off mute. Okay, so, and for the Central Florida area, I guess where I could start with is with the collective, because actually I started with the collective before I became the UCF AmeriCorps recruiter. And so with the collective, when that group came together, they first came together with a mind of creating a mission and a vision, and then some focus areas. And within those focus areas, I'm just going to read off a few. There was outreach being one of them, service, advocacy, scholarship, and partnership. And then from those overarching goals, they came together and created committees that looked at these areas and tried to find, again, where are the points of nuances that different programs are seeing, and where they can tap into. And so from there, my role, that was before got into the role. This role is kind of the first of its kind, having an AmeriCorps recruiter on a college campus. And so from there, once I came into the role, I kind of just continued off of the same focus areas of the service collective, that of being outreach. What does outreach look like? Where are we? What do students want to know? And then also service, trying to tailor the message that community service is for everyone, and looking at, okay, what does that mean? So if you're interested, maybe you have a background in, social work. What does that mean for you? What are some community service opportunities that may be available to you? What programs can you be connected with? And then also with that, advocacy. So one of the things that, uh, what would I want to say? One of the kind of salient issues or concerns among students was that of housing. Orlando being one of the more expensive places or Central Florida being one of the more expensive places to live or to find lodging. And so from that, the collective then created the sub-housing committee. And through the sub-housing committee, we started to tackle the issue of what does it mean to have accessible housing for students that are willing and excited to serve, but they may not necessarily have the monetary means to do so. And I think we could go on and on from there, but we kind of focused in on looking at what areas we wanted to actually identify. And out of those, it came outreach, service, advocacy, scholarship, and partnership.
I think that's so interesting in both of your answers. I'm hearing before you could really dive in and do the work, there was a lot of important thought work that had to happen from an organizing perspective, thinking through goal setting, what that needed to look like. Because I think this has come up in some other parts of the convening so far, but there's a lot of different ways that you can collaborate and for how collaboration can look. And figuring out some of the ways that you want that to look in your community, definitely it takes work just getting to that point. And then the really unique thing that's happened in both of your areas is that idea of being able to bring in someone like Mika in your case that's focused on joint recruitment and has that as an actual day-to-day responsibility thing that you're focusing on as well, which I think is a really important thing to highlight from both of those as well. The other thing that I would share out that I think is starting to come up in both of the answers is also thinking through what recruiting locally looks like and what it looks like to be building more diverse pipelines into service, thinking through reaching audiences that might not have had as much of a background understanding of service coming in, and thinking about how it's being positioned as a pathway locally as well. So I'm curious to dig into that a little bit more, and I've already seen a few folks in the comments leave notes indicating that they had an interest in thinking through strategies for equitable local recruitment as well. What are some of the ways, as you're doing outreach to local residents, that you're thinking through how you're focusing on audiences, how you're focusing on messaging, and how some of that's tying back to those larger goals that you've set as a collaborative as well?
Okay, I guess I'll jump in first on this one. So some of the things, especially within my role, one of the first things that I focused on when entering the role was creating what is known as an omni-channel. And pretty much what an omni-channel is, it's what people call, there's different channels by which people or constituents can be reached. When we talk about that equitable piece, where are they, finding them where they are, and then bringing them in. And so what an omni-channel does is it actually tries to funnel different individuals from wherever you're meeting them, whether it's on social media or within a classroom presentation or we have a BuzzFeed themed quiz that students can kind of just scan and take a little quiz and see where they fit in. And so from that, once they're able to kind of get to that touch point, we try to build from that. So now, wherever that is, I kind of have, and I have the ability to access their information. And from that, I reach out personally to see, okay, hi, I noticed you tapped in, let's say using the BuzzFeed theme quiz. And I noticed that you're interested in environmental awareness. Did you know that you can serve within that sphere? If you're still interested, please reach out to me, and finding different ways to do that. The other thing I'm thinking of on the more equitable side, or focusing on different challenges that service members may see. So some of the workshops that I have put together to put on are around different challenges that they may see, finding the certain social issues and actually having presentations that are tailored towards those issues, not necessarily advertising that, okay, this program is looking for student, or this program is looking for members, but actually speaking to an issue and saying, well, this specific program actually is tailored towards dealing with this issue. And if you're interested, I could take you further from there. So just finding different ways to tap students at where they are, whether it's through interest, or maybe they were scrolling on social media and they just happened to follow my page. But once they get there, bringing them in and trying to kind of funnel them into, okay, this is how AmeriCorps, or how you can be a part of AmeriCorps and how you can serve.
Searching for the unmute button a year and a half later. I love, Mika, you're using the funnel as an image, and that's really where we started, was this realization that if you imagine recruitment as a funnel, and the way I described, we were basically pouring in prospects from only two places primarily that were national portals, not local portals. And when we were doing anything local, it was more advertisement than recruitment. So it was more post on Craigslist, post on Idealist, post on our local nonprofit association. And we had a friend of our network kind of look at a recruitment audit. And I use that it was a really informal, like what's working, what's not audit. And this person said, yeah, you're advertising, you're not recruiting. And recruiting is what Mika was just describing. Recruiting is sourcing people. Where are the people who might be interested in this? And whether that's Boolean sourcing, or, going to student organizations at universities or partner organizations, where are all the people who might be interested in this? And then doing that kind of one-on-one follow-up. And so our local recruiter, her goal this year was to source 2,200 prospects, and she engaged current members as recruitment ambassadors to help with that sourcing. But the big idea was we get them in, then our recruiter would have a touch point with them. Ultimately, our organizations have to hire people, like interview them and all that. So then she would pass them to recruiters at organizations, who then would do all of the cultivation. And we did a lot of training and working with our recruiters on what does that look like, so that you don't have one conversation and never hear from them again, or interview them, but they don't take the job. Like, what is it about the reeling someone in all the way until they're serving, right? That's recruitment. And so anyway, that just, as you were saying that, I was like, that's a real similarity of just realizing we got to shift that mindset. We've got to bring people into this movement. And that happens through relationships and conversations and phone calls and follow-up texts and all of this, really, frankly, time-consuming work that does, fill seats. It does bring people into service when you make it personal in that way. So anyway, that struck me as a similarity. I think the other thing that I would say here in Central Texas is, when we did our strategic planning process, it didn't take long into that to realize that the need for our organizations to become more diverse, more inclusive, and more equitable was really important. It became clear through our stakeholder interviews, through focus groups with members of color, and so on, that yes, there are barriers to service, like housing cost, that's real, like the low living allowance, that's real. But we recognized those weren't the only barriers. Some of the barriers were about how our organizations show up, how it feels when you walk in their office, how it feels when you work on their staff. And to the credit of our organizations, I think there was a lot of very humbling learning that came out of sort of our market analysis and conversation with stakeholders that could have made them turn and run, right? And instead, they made one of their 3 strategic priorities and their shared commitment that each organization would do the hard work to become more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive. And my sense, based on what we've learned here, is that you can do all the recruitment tactical stuff you want, but if organizations don't start to change from within, to change their policies, to change their hiring methods, to change their organizational cultures, it doesn't matter, because word gets out really quickly. And a number of stakeholders said, you know, there is maybe a reason that Central Texans aren't knocking at your door to serve with you. And I think, again, the organizations, to their credit, have been working together and individually now over the course of years to change some of those dynamics. And so I can talk about that more now or later. Jonas, I'll let you do that. But I don't want to ignore that, because I think it's really a foundational root cause of why recruitment is hard for many AmeriCorps programs. And if you don't get at that root, all these other things aren't necessarily going to solve your recruitment challenges.
I think that, I mean, this could easily be a 4-hour session versus a 40-minute session. I think in both of your answers, you're getting into so many different interesting things, which, like, a key part is, like, recruitment is a lot more than you probably think of on the surface. It's not just whether someone hears about the opportunity, even applies to the opportunity, but it's really all of the different structures that are going out there, from how you're talking about the opportunity in the first place, how it's being designed, with who's able to come in, do the service here, is it actually accessible? I've heard in both of your answers so far talking about language, how you're positioning it, where you're working to get the word out, also how you're thinking through some of the structural challenges that might also be there, and preventing someone potentially from being able to serve in some cases, whether it's living allowance, whether it's housing difficulties that they have locally. And it really, like, you can take this piece by piece, which is the way that it has to be done, but you also can't necessarily treat any of these things in isolation either. And I think that's the benefit when you're looking at it from a collaborative model, is that you have a chance to really be reflecting not just one organization looking at it, but I think to the point you were just getting at, Natalie, like, especially when it's some of those harder conversations that you might have to be having, knowing that a lot of other people are also going through that process, thinking through it, I think can be immensely beneficial in leading to better outcomes in that space. In sort of thinking through that area of collaboration, one way I wanted to build out that conversation is just thinking a little bit more generally about the role of service years and thinking through other partner organizations, people that you might be working with locally as a part of that. Because we know that while a lot of service year organizations are small but mighty teams that are doing a lot of work, and even when there's a shared recruiter stepping in to help that, it's not something that's happening in isolation in a community. And when you're thinking through both the tactical side and how service years are being positioned, what are some of the ways that you've been able to build out and utilize local partnerships to be supporting your strategies in recruitment as well?
So we identified building partnerships as one of our core strategic activities. Once when we wrote the job description for our local recruiter, it was not just go source and recruit, it was also build partnerships. And so ultimately where that led was identifying what we called pipeline partners. So these are organizations that are connected to Central Texans, diverse groups of Central Texans who might be interested in service. And those partner organizations need to know about this opportunity, be able to tell the people they work with about it, and so on. And then we talked about affiliate partners. So these are folks who don't necessarily connect with the people we'd love to recruit, but they're here in the community and they don't know about national service. So let's have them be affiliates and have them really know, so that at least there's some awareness, so that there's the occasional, have you ever thought about, national service? And then one big realization about a year in, when we were talking about pipeline partners, was that if our 9 organizations were not us, if we weren't us, we would be pointing at us as pipeline partners. So communities and schools of Central Texas, Breakthrough Central Texas, these organizations, American Youth Works, Literacy First, they work with huge numbers of Central Texans. And so this year, we really elevated in our partnership strategy, essentially leveraging ourselves as our own best recruitment partners. So are you telling the children, the parents, the clients, the partners, the school counselors, all of these people that you work with, are they getting the memo on the next recruitment fair, or how to serve, or why, taking a year after high school or after college could be just the right thing to do? And COVID and the pandemic made it hard to sort of activate all 9 organizations to spread that word. But we still came away thinking that's one of the most critical strategies for local recruitment. And listening to Flint's team talk yesterday, I think they said 73% of their members are local, and listening certainly to the Boys and Girls Club talk about kids growing up in their program and then coming back to serve, was affirming to that, the importance of that strategy. I think we've held this opportunity sort of close to our chest. And again, like locally, I know most of our recruitment was on these national portals, and we're forgetting that our organizations work with literally, nearly 30,000 Central Texans who don't know that they are eligible to serve. And we need to tell them that they're eligible, and then quit advertising and start recruiting and pull more of them in. Yeah.
And then on our end, I know especially within my role, the partnership building has been a bit more organic, and that's something we definitely are hoping to focus and hone in on this coming year. So this position is just, I believe we're going into our 4th year of this position being in existence. And so when it comes to partnerships, especially on the college campus, one of the things that I was focused on was actually tapping into different areas of the different levels of higher education. And so there's the academic side, for those who might know, there's the academic side, and then the student life side or student affairs side. And so what areas within those 2 branches can we tap into? And then also on the administrative side, that's another thing that we could work on, actually getting the deans and provosts and presidents of different colleges to kind of look at, okay, this is what AmeriCorps is, and how can we kind of
Fortunately, I think we might have lost Mika for a moment. Hopefully we'll have her back in a second. As we're potentially waiting for her to come back on, Natalie, I'm wondering if you can take one of the questions that we had come in from one of our audience members, who's asking a more logistical one. So obviously in Central Texas, as in Central Florida, organizations were able to band together to actually have a joint recruiter. Logistically, what did that process look like for actually being able to fund that position?
Yeah, well, so, we had to build the case right? And as you do anytime you're seeking funding, why would this matter? Why would this be a game changer? And we had to find the partner. And we've been lucky to have the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation be willing to continue supporting what we're doing here. And so that was key. Having said that, we have been successful in getting grants from other organizations because we found that donors are really excited that we're working together. They're really excited that since we're all trying to do the same thing in a lot of ways, which is to build a more racially and economically equitable community or be part of building one, they're excited that we're working together. And so we were able to secure that funding from Michael and Susan Dell, but I'm pretty confident there were a number of other funders we might have been able to attract because it's a compelling ask. Particularly when you talk about, wanting this person to recruit locally to create more access for Central Texans. And especially once the pandemic hit, where, so many people were out of work. And here is this opportunity to do service that provides a living allowance and health insurance and lots of things that people didn't, and an ed award, like lots of things that people were suddenly lacking. And so, it's building the case and finding someone who's interested in it. Some of our most important donors, including Michael and Susan Dell, are donors to several of our organizations. So they love some of our organizations already. And I think initially, our organizations would agree that there was a little bit of like, I don't know, together we want to ask my funder, are we competing? Is this going to take away? But I would say, several years into this, I think everyone would agree that together we're able to access resources that our organizations would not be able to access alone. So that would be my encouragement if you're thinking about, hiring a shared recruiter, is that you have people who love some of your organizations, donors who love some of your organizations, who would love to support you working with others to add up to more than you would add up to alone. So not to be afraid of trying to raise the money. There were some logistical challenges. AmeriCorps Central Texas isn't an organization. We didn't want the recruiter to work for one of the 9 organizations. So we had to find a PEO. We had to work with Austin Community. We had to do all these things to figure out how do we even hire someone. And people could reach out to me and I could talk you through how we did that. But we found a way to hire someone together. And it really was game changing. Most organizational recruiters here in Central Texas have no professional recruitment experience. They are service year alums who have come into essentially entry-level positions, and they're working hard and well-intentioned and doing great work. And I think, there would be good agreement that bringing in someone with professional recruitment experience was game-changing. And so it's absolutely worth it. Quick anecdotes, and Jonas, you've heard some of this, but when our professional recruiter came in, she couldn't find all the applications, right? And as she did find applications, she found lots and lots of unnecessary steps in processes, how many rounds of interviews and how many written pieces and how many this. And even we began with our DEI work combined with having a recruiter, realizing that some of our organizations were putting additional barriers in the way. So they were having degree requirements that weren't needed to do the work, and things like that. And so bringing her in really helped organizations streamline their processes, look at data to figure out where they were losing people. In past years, I would sit in meetings and recruiters would just say, yeah, we've still got, 17 empty seats and our program starts next week. But there was no data analysis to know why and where did you lose them. And so being able to do that really is different. And so I think there's a compelling case to be made. I think donors want to support collaboration. And I know that bringing in someone who knows how to do recruitment to get everyone coordinated makes a world of difference.
I think that was a great way of answering it, because it was kind of started with the identifying the need, some of the problems that you're seeing crop up across the programs, and really working from there to action out where was the funding coming in from it, logistically, how does it work with where the person's actually being placed. So there's definitely a number of different ways that could probably ultimately look in different communities, but if it does seem like something that's going to help from an organization standpoint, a capacity standpoint, and really being able to build out some of those different strategies. Definitely, I would say, both from what we've heard from you and what we've obviously heard and seen from Mika and her answers, that's definitely an invaluable resource to be able to bring as well. So we just have a couple minutes left at this point. Mika, if you are back online, I'll probably turn it over to you just for a quick last question of if there are any communities just getting started in this work, thinking about how they might want to approach it, any words of wisdom, advice for thinking out getting this type of collaboration started? Still on mute. We'll wait just a moment and see if we can get that. Natalie, any last thoughts that you want to offer while we see if we can get that figured out?
Yeah. And your question is just sort of if a community is thinking of doing shared recruitment, sort of words of.
Yeah, anything that might be helpful for folks just getting started in this work.
Yeah. Probably one of the biggest things, and you sort of echoed this back earlier, Jonas, is figure out the landscape. I mentioned that it was talking in focus groups with core members of color and with stakeholders in the community, trying to find out why we were having recruitment challenges that then set the course for all of our strategies. So it set the DEI priority and commitment, and it set the idea of, our organizational recruiters are doing everything they can, and there's no one with time to crack the local recruitment nut. So it led us to hire. So sort of doing that real careful landscape analysis really matters. A couple other thoughts as you think about this, that's having a plan that's really strategic, identifying key partners, being data-driven and using organizational strengths. So we could see, one organization is losing people after the interview. So another organization isn't. So what do you do after the interview? That means that you're getting people all the way to service. Eliminating barriers in your recruitment process. In some cases, our organizations were their own worst enemies when it came to recruitment. Even with the Service Year Exchange, we had to work with Jonas because some of the postings on that platform were shutting people out. And so we had to say, let's help get everybody's platforms firing on all cylinders. That would help with recruitment. And then finally, really watching language and messaging. When we started recruiting together, we could hear what was coming out of everyone's mouths. And there were a lot of recruitment pitches that were not inclusive, that clearly and unintentionally signaled that national service is for privileged people, and that talked about the people being served in ways that absolutely othered them. So if they were in the room, they weren't thinking this was for them. And we couldn't have heard that if our recruiters didn't do presentations one after the other. And they could recognize it in each other's presentations. And then we could work to change our pitch and change our messagings and change who we're talking to, who we're talking about, how we talk about them. And that was a huge learning. If we had done nothing else but that, I think we would get to better recruitment outcomes. So that's a lot, but if you're starting, start small and just start. That keeps being said over and over.
I think that sentiment's a great final insight as we close out, is that what we talked about is a lot. And again, why I said this conversation could easily go on 4 hours. And I know we've already run a couple of minutes over, but really there are a lot of different ways to approach this work from a planning perspective. And I think the key things are getting organized around how you want this to look, what you really want to focus on, And a lot of the work can really build out from there if you're getting alignment on some of those big goals, strategies, ideas for how you want that to look. So as we close out this session, for everyone in attendance, we're actually going to have a second run at all of the sessions. So you can hop over back into the sessions tab on the left side. There's a couple of different options that you can also check out to hear more about the great work happening in other communities as well. I know Natalie and Mika both shared some great insights throughout this presentation, so definitely feel free to follow up with them if you have specific questions on anything they shared. But so great getting to go through this with all of you, and I hope all of you have a great next session as well.